Hey guys, hoping everyone's having a fantastic weekend, having fun with your homework too. It's a sunny day today outside. The weather's fantastic. Sun's out, no clouds, clear skies. And as the head CP, I feel responsible for your well-being, which is why I've decided that in such a good weather like this, it's too risky for you to go outside and venture into the sunlight. It's too much UV radiation for computer science people like you and me, so might as well stay indoors and I'll teach you some MySQL. And by the way, this is my relaxation corner. No more suits today because I'm relaxed. But as a head CP, even when I'm in my relaxation corner, I feel responsible for your education, which is why I'm spending my Sunday teaching you guys how to do MySQL. So let's get started, shall we? This video is actually going to be split into two parts. Part one, I'm going to build a database. In part two, I will show you how you can interact with the database in Java using the JDBC connector. So let's get started. First, before we write any code in MySQL, I want to take a moment and talk about the design, what our database should look like. So the database that we're building today consists of three tables: the user registry, the vehicle registry, and the vehicle lookup table. So this will basically be a system where we can have a list of users with their IDs, username, and password, a list of vehicles with their vehicle ID and details, and then we pair up a user or users with their vehicle or vehicles. So that will be the general premise of our database. And you see here I have a UML diagram that I made here that shows the relationships between the three tables. We have our user registry. We have three columns in the table. The first column is UID. It is a primary key. It is auto-generated and auto-incremented, and it is of type integer with 3 digits. It means that the upper bound of the value is 999. And I doubt we're going to use up all of that in today's video. And next we have the username column. And U stands for unique, as you can see on the right side here. And the username column is of type varchar20. What does varchar mean? Varchar means a character array of variable length, and that length is 20. You can think of varchar as basically a string, but the string takes up a fixed amount of space no matter how many characters you have in it. A varchar saves space because you can define how many characters you want for this particular column. And we also have the password column, which is also of type varchar. But I did not make it unique because two people can have the same password. The username column, however, I want it to be unique. And then we come to the vehicle registry table. VID stands for vehicle ID, same idea as UID. They're both primary keys. And vehicle ID is also of type integer 3. And then we have the details column. I'll actually change it to 100. So the detail column describes what the vehicle is: the year, the make, model, brand, whatever, trim. And it should also be unique because there's no point in having duplicate vehicle types. And now we come to the vehicle lookup table. The vehicle lookup table consists of three columns: a UID, which I should also change to 3, a UID, a VID, and notes. And notice FK. What does FK mean? FK means foreign key. So the UID in this vehicle lookup table references the UID in the user registry table. And what does that mean? You can think of it as a pointer of sorts. So the UID, this column here in this vehicle lookup table, it actually points to an existing UID here in the user registry table. So if a UID does not exist in the user registry table, it cannot exist in the vehicle lookup table. And it is the same idea for VID. And notice how they have exactly the same type. This one's integer 3, same as this one, which is also integer 3. And this one's integer 3, same as this one, which is also integer 3. Because this UID is referencing another value here, so the type they have to match. And I also have a third column called notes of length varchar 100. That's basically whatever extra note that we want to have inserted. And note the N here. N stands for nullable. Nullable means that when you're inserting an entry into the table, this one can be null. It is okay for notes to be null. It is okay for you to not specify what notes is. And the default behavior for all columns is actually nullable, unless you explicitly note otherwise that that column is not null. So again, this is the general premise of what we're about to do in the next few minutes. We're going to create 3 tables. One for tracking the registered users, one for tracking the registered vehicle types, and the third one to link the user and their vehicles together. And you may be wondering, what are these symbols here? What do they mean? These symbols denote relationships, and in this case, it's a one-to-many relationship. So what does that mean? It means that for every single UID in user registry, I can have it appear multiple times in the vehicle lookup table. Because what if a user has multiple vehicles? We would need multiple entries for the same UID. And that's the same idea here. In the vehicle registry, for every single VID, we can have the same VID appear multiple times in vehicle lookup table, because what if 2 different users drive the same type of car, right? And you don't have to worry about this diagram. You don't have to worry about all of these. These are what's called UML diagrams, and they're only important when you get into 310. I mean, it's good to learn about them, but you don't have to know about this. And so that's that. And next, let's dive into how to actually write some SQL commands to build our database. Now, you guys, for this semester, for fall 2019, you guys started using Google Cloud Platform, which I'm not too sure how to use with Java. So we're still figuring that out. But in the meantime, I wanted to get this video out as quickly as I can so that you guys can start writing some code and thinking about homework 3. So I'll just run my SQL server locally, and all the code's the same because it's SQL code, it's Java code. You just have to work on connecting it to the Google Cloud MySQL server afterwards. So let's open that up. MySQL Workbench. And you can use this, you can actually use this to connect to your Google Cloud MySQL server as well. I'm just not too sure how to set it up. But for this case, I'll be running it locally. As you can see here is localhost. And let's create a new table, a new database, shall we? Query 1. All right. I want to call this database CSCI 201 _ fall 2019. And how can you create that? Let's create it by doing create. Now, you don't have to do all caps for SQL commands. I just like to do it because it would be easier for me to distinguish what word is a SQL command and what isn't. Create database. Let's call it CSCI 201 fall 2019. Let's try running this and see what happens. Oh, we get an error. Now, why is that? Let's read the error message. It says the database exists. You see the error code here says cannot create database because it already exists. And that's because I already made one when I was writing the code for this tutorial. How can we make sure that this error doesn't happen? Let's make it so that if the table exists, then we drop it. Dropping basically means deleting. Let's do drop database if exists CSCI 21 fall 2019. So this line makes sure that if a database of the name CSCI 201 fall 2019 already exists, it's going to drop it. If not, it moves on. And now we can run this query, and you see we successfully created a new database. And we just have to refresh, and we can see it's here. But currently we don't have any tables because we didn't make any. So let's keep going. And third line you want to type out is use CSCI 201 fall 2019. This basically means we're specifically, all the code that follows is using this database specifically. Now you might be wondering what's the point of this? The point is that if you have to work with multiple databases in one SQL file, if you don't have this, then the program won't know, and it's actually very ambiguous as to which database you're interacting with. And it's never a bad thing to be explicit when it comes to programming. And with that out of the way, let's create our actual table. So we can do that by doing create table, user registry. And in user registry, as you can see, we want 3 columns: UID, username, and password. And UID is of type integer, username and password varchar. Let's do it. UID, that's the name of the column. Integer 3, that's the type of the column. And we want to make it a primary key. And we also want it to auto increment. What auto increment means is that it starts from 1, and every time you insert new stuff into this table, you don't have to specify the value of this UID. It's just going to increase by 1 based on the most recent UID. And again, we don't want it to be null, so not null. And some of you might be asking, if this UID, if we're not setting it, if it's auto-incrementing, why do we still need not null? And I don't fully understand this either. You can try it without not null, but there's no harm in adding it, just to be safe. So that's our first column dealt with. Now let's move on to our second one, username. So username, varchar 20. Is it 20? Yes. And we don't want it to be null, and it has to be unique. So we don't want duplicates. And now we move on to password. Password. Oh, you see it highlighted password for me. So what that means is that password may or may not be a reserved keyword in SQL. So let's avoid that. Let's just do PW. PW varchar 20, as we agreed, and not null. Doesn't have to be unique because 2 people can share the same password. And that's our table dealt with. Let's run this query. Tables, you can see that we have it here. And if we do a preview, you can see that we have 3 different columns, exactly the way we want them to be. They're all empty for now, but we're going to fill them in later. Let's move on and create the next table. Let's go ahead and create this one, vehicle registry. And our first entry would be VID. And it would have pretty much the same attributes as UID. So primary key, auto increment, not null. And then the next one would be detail. We want it to be varchar 100, and we want it to be unique. Oops. And let's run that again. See what we get. Refresh. See, we have our vehicle registry table. And now let's create the last table. It's called vehicle lookup table. Now keep in mind that we're not using brackets, we're using parentheses for MySQL stuff. And the first value will be UID. Now take note here, when we're creating foreign keys, even if we're creating foreign keys, even if this key references some other key, we still have to create it first. This is what I've been seeing in the labs, is that people, they don't create this column before declaring it is a foreign key. And then you just get an error saying that the key doesn't exist. So let's do that. Let's declare it first. UID integer 3, not null. Doesn't have to be primary key. Doesn't have to be auto increment because we're getting it from this table. Same thing with VID. And now let's do the foreign key thing. How can we make them foreign keys? And the syntax goes like this. Foreign key, and then the name of the key in this table references the name of the target of the reference table, parentheses, the name of the column, references. This is how we do it, and we can do the same for VID. This is pretty straightforward, so I'm gonna do it really quickly. And lastly, we want to have a notes column. That should be nullable. And by nullable, we just mean that we don't add not null. It's by default nullable. All right. And there we have it. And let's try creating all those. All green, I like that. Let's take a look at the tables. User registry, 3 fields. Vehicle registry, 2. And vehicle lookup table, 3. All right, that's it. That's how you make a table in MySQL. It's that easy. Now let's insert some values into those tables. And the syntax goes like this. Insert into the name of the table. Yeah, let's try to add a new user. And the 2 fields that you want to insert values into, and then values. Let's do CP password 1, 2, 3. It's a very secure password. By the way, this is not a good way of storing passwords. You should at least use some kind of hashing. But for the purposes of this class, you don't have to worry about any of these. You can just store them as plain text, and that's fine. And when we execute this line, you're going to see a new entry in our user registry. So let's do it. All right, query is complete. Let's refresh. And you can see we have our username and password. And you can also see that the UID was auto-generated. And it started off as 1. Let's insert another user. That should be a semicolon. And now let's run this. can see that we have 2 users. Keep in mind that every time I'm running this code, I'm deleting the entire database and starting over from scratch. And that's why I don't get duplicate entry errors. But if you don't clear out the database and you insert something that you've inserted before, it's going to give you an error. And the way that you can deal with it is either you delete the previous entry, or you can force the program to overwrite the previous entry by using, I believe, insert ignore into. Yep, and that basically overwrites the previous entry. But let's not worry about that right now. So now we have 2 users. Let's insert some vehicles. Insert into vehicle registry. And that one, we only have the detail column to worry about. Values. Now, what's a good car? C43. Everyone likes that. 3 liters, V6, bi-turbo. There we go. Yeah, you don't want to get a C63 because it consumes too much gas. And when the fuel prices are so high, like nowadays, you want something that's slightly more fuel efficient. Values, let's do another one. And now when I run the query, we should end up with 2 new entries in the vehicle registry. And hang on, what's going on here? Ah, I spelled it wrong. And you see it gave me an error saying the table does not exist. Now let's run this again. And there we go, we got 2 cars. Now I want to associate a user with a car. And let's do that. Insert into vehicle lookup table, UID, VID, notes. We can actually, yeah, let's do notes first. UID, let's do me first, shall we? And VID, let's do 2. All right, let's see what happens. No errors, that's very nice. Let's take a look here. And indeed, we have our entry. Now, what if I give the foreign key value some value that doesn't exist in the table that it's referencing? Let's say I give it a 3 for VID, but the VID in this table only goes up to 2. What's going to happen? It's going to tell you that it's going to give you an error saying that a foreign key constraint fails. So you can't do that. And we can also optionally just not insert anything into notes. And we can still execute this query because it's optional. It's null. So this is how you do it. And this concludes the first part of our video. How to create the database, some tables, use foreign keys, and do things with it, and insert some entries. And in the second part of the video, I'm going to show you how to do all this in Java instead. And actually, before you go, I almost forgot. Let me also show you how you can select values and display them. By selecting values, what I mean is that I want to fetch some column or some columns that matches a certain criteria. And in this case, I want to find the entry for the user whose username is Jeff. And how can we do that? Select star means all from user registry, where, that's the condition, username equals Jeff. And it has to be a uppercase G. And it's going to give us a new table, a temporary one, that shows the results. And you can see, there you go. And that's how you do it. Select all from this, where this, and this. So this concludes the first part of our video.